All right, welcome to Money Talks, where we're here to talk about, you guessed it, money and all things finance. We're here to give you the information and strategies you need to set yourself up for financial freedom. Because let's face it, school didn't teach us the skills and vital information. These skills and vital information. And if you're in school now, or you just graduated, you're in luck because you can learn from our mistakes and the wisdom we've learned along the way. My name is Esposito, and I'm joined by my two longtime buddies and co-hosts and financial experts, Chris Badaracco and Mike Petrillo. Welcome, fellas.
I like how you introduced us first as friends.
You like that?
Experts. Yeah, it feels good to know that we're friends first.
Right. Appreciate it, Will.
Yeah. How you guys doing?
Doing good. I saw you were selling houses this week.
I actually was shadowing a realtor. Can't claim to be an agent yet.
Not slinging houses yet?
Not just yet, but I'm on my way.
I love that. I think it's an awesome move.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's I'm excited about it. I'm excited. It's a complete career shift from working with kids in person to working with houses and people. So I'm really excited about it.
Nice.
Yeah. And just before we jump into this, I want to read a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this show do not reflect the views and opinions of Pzna Investment Management.
Nailed it.
Crushed it. Now we're covered.
Awesome. All right. So for our new viewers, I want to go in and have you guys introduce yourself real quick. Just tell us, who you are, what you're all about, and how you got to where you are. Mike, you want to start off?
Sure. I'm Mike Petrillo. I've worked the majority of my career. I've worked in financial operations. Worked at a few different places on different sides of the business, and just Will brought this up to me, this idea for the show, and I thought it was awesome. And a little bit about me.
Thank you for sharing, Michael. Yeah, so my name is Chris Badaracco. I recently started my own financial planning firm in March 1st of this year. I got approved. I've been doing that for the last 6 months or so. Before that, I was working at National RIA, doing pretty much the same stuff I'm doing now, working with clients and as far as with investments, taxes, financial planning, estate planning, and insurance. I kind of got my grasp in taxes and wanted to pursue that. So I'm currently finishing up my master's in taxation, and love talking about taxes. So hopefully we kind of dive into that in this segment. So
that's not something you hear too many people say, is they love talking about taxes.
I just think it makes sense. I think, I would encourage more people to do their own tax returns because it's you owe a certain amount throughout the year and you're making payments. And I think it's funny when people kind of start thinking about taxes, they get intimidated. But honestly, it's, if you just, you do the research, you look into it, and I mean, it's your money. I think when people start kind of feeling that, they get really excited about it. So I think I would encourage younger people to start doing their taxes early on, I think you kind of get an enjoyment looking for different credits and looking for things to take advantage of. And I think that's honestly the first step that I would push somebody kind of starting out in finance to kind of look into. And I think, kind of just using that as a way to kind of get into other areas of finance would be my suggestion to anybody. That's kind of how I started, and I think it was a great way to good starting point for anybody interested in finance, because it's going to affect you your whole life no matter what career you pursue, whether it's you decide to start a business or you're working for a company or anything. As your income increases, the more taxes you're going to pay, and honestly the more interested you're going to be about it. Because it's funny, if I tell somebody they have a balance due, and they weren't expecting it, they're going to get, they come back to me with questions that, like, honestly, they've, somebody with no tax experience all of a sudden becomes extremely good at taxes because they want to look for ways to not pay it. So it's a nice starting point, I think, for looking at getting into finance and getting into how things work, and it really kind of it's a snapshot of your financial picture for the year. So I would encourage anybody to kind of look through it that way.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that just from someone who didn't know a ton about taxes. And I remember my family always used this one firm every year, and I would just do it through my family. And then there was one year where like my income went up and I like got less back, and I was just like, why? Like I wanted to know, like, why am I getting less money, or like why, So I agree with you, like, and you do get more interested and you look for different credits and ways you can save money or get more money back. But that's actually exactly how I got into doing my own taxes.
I think that's how everybody gets into it. It's as soon as you get that one hit of like,
oh, like, why
wait,
why am I getting less? Yeah, like that's
exactly.
not cool.
What happened? Like you didn't do a good enough job. No, like it's already it's depends on how much withholding you have throughout the year, your income throughout the year, and kind of looking at it and mapping it out, because it's not like, I mean,
they're like, run the numbers again. It's like, I did it right.
Crunch those numbers.
You just don't really know. Yeah. And that's
crunch.
Yeah. It's just like, spin the wheel again. Like,
exactly. And I like that about taxes. It's very, you can have a plan for everything else, and everything else there's probability with every other kind of plan. With taxes, there's really no probability. This is what's gonna, if this is your income and this is how much you paid the IRS throughout the year, this is how much you're getting back, or this is how much you're gonna owe. There's no, we're putting a plan in place and we have a, and 60 to 80% chance of probability of success. No, like, if you don't pay the IRS, you're gonna owe them next year. And I think it's very cut and dry, and I love talking about it.
So there's always people, and I've definitely been this person before, who have said, oh, they should have taught us taxes in high school, or we should have learned about taxes in school. And just to play like devil's advocate to my own thoughts, but I also think back to when I was in high school, and we might have learned a little bit about taxes, but it's really hard to make that relative when you don't really have a paycheck coming in, or so let's say we're talking to a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old who's got their first job, mm-hmm. right? And they're on the books. What are some things that you think is important for young people and young adults? Maybe not just 17, maybe, from 17 to 21,
it's usually going to, they know? It's usually going to happen when you start getting to the point where you're making, I actually don't know the threshold off the top of my head, but it's like 5,000 to 10,000 before you have to file your own personal tax return. And if you claim that if your parents are providing more than 50% of your support and you're living at home with them, they can claim you. So it's not really going to be, you're not really going to file your own tax return. But I'd say more of a student in college, that's really when you want to kind of dive in. And then even probably your first 2 years after college, and looking, feeling the student loan interest deduction, and then seeing, as you're paying more principal and less interest, as the years kind of go by, you're going to get less of a deduction for that. And I think kind of looking into the reasons why, like Mike said, and I think and studying as to what the deductions and credits, as far as like American Opportunity Credit if you're still in school, or lifetime learning credit if you're still going back to school, if you finished your undergrad and you're going back to school. There's other credits out there that can, I would recommend looking into, that are going to make a huge difference. Like, and it's just, a huge difference. I'm talking about like a couple $100, but still, like when you're young, you're not really making a lot of money. It feels good to do your own homework and look into it and do what's right, like, and dig down, and then you see the results, and it feels good. And honestly, it's intimidating because there's a lot of, IRS code and a lot of jargon, but when you break down and you really kind of look at your own situation, it's honestly not that difficult. I wouldn't be intimidated by it at all. Just read every line and look through it, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I think I think to Chris's point too, it is kind of difficult because if you're not making enough money, it's not making as big of an impact on your life. But as you get older, you're getting a decent return back, and it's a material number. It's a real number that can actually impact. You can go into your savings, you can invest it, you can go on vacation. You could do a lot of things with it. And I think, unfortunately, it might just be something that you really learn about it more as you get a little bit older. But like Chris said, it doesn't have to be when you're 30 or 40 to start doing your own taxes. You could start doing it as soon as you get that statement every year from paying back your student loans that shows how much interest you can claim.
Right. And I would also say, like, it's a weird topic, because there's literally like one thing that like started my like early career. I sat down with somebody who was like a brain surgeon, and I was in a meeting with him and and our partners at the firm that I used to work at. And I remember being like super intimidated, like, this guy's probably a genius. I mean, he was a genius. He literally, life or death situations. I'm sitting here doing taxes, like, that's not nearly. But this guy is like the smartest, like one of the smartest people I've probably ever been in a room with, and he's asking like the simplest tax questions. But at the same time, it's like, he's never looked at a book he's never studied a tax book before. Why should he know anything? Like, he's just studied medical books his entire career. So I think it's wild how like, there's, and at the same time, there's also people. I literally had a call with a retired professor, and he sent me his like an Excel sheet of his breakout, and it was literally like to the T of, like, I was like, you don't even need me. Like, you literally just did a projection. Like, and he doesn't have really any tax experience. He did say he loves keeping budgets and loves doing this stuff. So, I mean, more power to him. But like, the span of people who know and people who don't is drastic. And I would just say, educate yourself, because it's going to be around your whole life, and there's a lot of things that you can take advantage of, especially when you're young, even as far as contributing to Roth IRAs and looking for different ways to save and different ways to mitigate taxes. Look into it now. Look, and don't look. And that's the other issue, is that people look at it from January to April, when realistically you need to be looking at it before December 31st and talking about taxes in the summer, and doing actual planning then, when you can take advantage of doing things in that tax year. You shouldn't be waiting till January and February to look for doing different things. So that would be my advice, is to kind of get a hold of your taxes, look at your pay stub, review it, make sure it makes sense now, rather than, finding out in April, like, oh no, I'm going to owe a boatload of money.
I think you brought up a great point when you mentioned the doctor or the brain surgeon who didn't really have a solid understanding or education on taxes. And that's really the point of this show, and having you guys here to really break down these almost basic but essential financial literary terms and just education in general, to give our younger audience an idea of what steps they can start taking to position themselves to be in maybe better situations than their older siblings or their parents, or just in general our generation, right? Like, so you mentioned taxes, Chris, being one of the main things you would mention to a young person. Mike, I'm interested to hear what's something that you think is important for young people, either in high school or in college, or even recently graduated, that they should be focusing on with their finances.
So kind of to piggyback a little bit what Chris was starting to say about Roth IRA, but especially, I mean, it's good to start, like, the younger you can start, the better. But, especially if you have a job right out of college, and your company has some kind of matching program, I would definitely contribute as much as you can comfortably to a 401k, because it's tax-free money. And if your company is going to be matching you, I just kind of look at it as free money, you know? So I know at my first job, they were willing to offer up to, and I don't think it's the same anymore, but up to a 6% match. So they would match me dollar for dollar up to 6%. So if I was contributing 3% of my salary to my 401k, they would contribute 3% of my salary to my 401k. But again, if you can do 6%, it seemed silly to me not to do 6%, right? I was leaving that extra 3% from the company, you know, that was not going into my bank account. And, you know, you don't get the satisfaction of the money right now, but it's just something that I feel like, you know, you'll thank yourself in 30, 40 years from now that you not only took the free money that you were getting from your company, but it's just a great way to start, you know, planning for the future.
No, I totally agree.
I was going to say, can you explain more of what that is, what a 401k is, what a Roth IRA is?
Yeah. So a 401k or an IRA, well, 401k, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but 401k is usually a for-profit, a company that's a for-profit. It's a retirement plan that you set up with your company. And, you know, so basically when you get paid every month, you know, when you see, if you look at your pay stub, you see your taxes coming out, but you'll also be seeing something called a 401k contribution come out. And it's whatever percent of your salary that you wish to contribute to your account comes out at a gross level. Yeah. So it's basically tax-free money going into an account that you can then invest into a wide variety of mutual funds or ETFs.
Yeah, and it's usually, 401k is usually set up by your employer, and they pick the investment funds and what you can choose. So there's limited ability on that end, but it's still, there still needs to be when they do set it up, there still needs to be a standard that you are getting offered enough to diversify your portfolio in that 401k, and you're getting deferred growth. And I think everyone loves Roth IRAs for the deferred growth aspect, but people forget that you're getting deferred growth in a 401k account. Yes, you're going to have to pay taxes when you hit 59 and a half, or you retire at 65 and you pull that money out of the 401k, then you're going to have to pay taxes. But the idea is, when you start making money when you're younger, that you're not paying taxes at your higher income level. And then when you pull it out at 60, when you don't have an income, maybe it's just Social Security, maybe it's just a pension, you're paying at your income tax rate then at 60 years old, when you have less, when hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, it could go the other way where you got just as much income, but realistically, that's mostly the idea. The Roth IRA, and what is incredible about it, and why young people should 100% take advantage of it, the difference is that you don't pay taxes on the money that goes into a 401k. It's completely deducted out of your paycheck. The Roth IRA, you're going to pay taxes now. You're going to put it into an account, and you still get that cash deferred growth, that you're not paying capital gains tax on any switches you make. You're not paying any interest or dividend that's getting kicked off. You don't have to report those as income. But when you hit retirement, you've already paid taxes on the way in. And when you take the withdrawal out of that Roth IRA, it's completely tax-free. So that's realistically the game plan with my clients. I have a lot of young clients, and like between the ages of like 30 and 45. And that is our number one goal is, yes, we need enough, figure out your savings, figure out your individual taxable accounts, figure that out first. But then how are we stuffing to get more deferred growth? How are we getting more into a Roth IRA? And there's income thresholds, but there's a lot of no, like I wouldn't call it a tax thing, but it's really not fun. But at the same time, if you're making money on it, I think it's pretty fun. But like there's ways to get around the income threshold, such as like a backdoor Roth contribution, or some 401k providers. A lot of them, like a lot of newer ones. This is almost like a newer, because I love looking at people's employee benefit plans, because there's a lot of good things in there that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, that they allow for after-tax dollars to be invested into their 401k plan. And then you can, same thing, roll that into a Roth, and it's not considered a contribution, it's considered a rollover. So there's no income limit on a rollover, there's an income limit on you contributing directly to a Roth. So looking for ways to plan to get more deferred growth, I think is extremely important for younger people to kind of look into as they start their careers and start looking for start making money. And that's I think that's the name of the game.
And I think another great thing about it is you're almost like the retirement plans, the IRA, the 401k. You're almost forced to just, like when I put stuff into my 401k, like I casually check it, once in a while, not really. But because you can't just take the money out, you're less nervous about the ups and downs of the market. The money is it's just sticky money. It's staying in there. And there's less FOMO or less being, nervous about if the market's going to dip. Over the course of time, you're going to finish up.
Right.
That's kind of what I love about it.
It's like a forced savings, and it's funny because people get super paranoid when there's dips in the market. Like obviously we all do, or human beings. But so I heard someone say once, it was like, all right, so you live in your home where in New Jersey, and it's got a value to it. Let's say your home drops 30%. Are you going to go sell your home? No, you're not going to sell your home. You're just gonna keep doing exactly what you're doing, and that's what you should be doing. It's your stock market, your portfolio could take a 30% hit. Does that mean you're going to sell every position? No, you shouldn't. Maybe you do a little rebalancing, but at the same time, I love the 401ks and retirement accounts because it has that little, you don't want to get hit with a 10% penalty. So I'm going to leave it there and not touch it. And honestly, it performs better than every other account that people have because they're less inclined to touch it.
So just to I have two questions, and then I just want to kind of overview all of that, because that was great information. When you say that the contributions for the Roth IRA, they get taxed, how does that work? So if I'm going to put the money, if I'm going to make a contribution to my Roth, what's the percentage? Is that federal income tax? Is that state income? How does that work?
So it would be the same. So you have to put money that's already it has to be wages. So if you don't have any wages for the year, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. However, like if you report wages on your tax return of however much, as long as it's below the threshold of the Roth contribution, which I think is like, honestly, for single, I think it's like 85, 90,000. If you make less than that, if you're paying taxes on that money, and you have taxable wages, you can contribute after-tax dollars into the Roth IRA.
Got it.
But there's also Roth 401k. A lot of companies have traditional 401ks and Roth 401ks, and same concept there. If you do a traditional 401k, that you're not going to pay taxes. That's going to be deducted out of your income and won't show up on your W-2 line 1. Like you'll get your W-2 and it won't have the 401k contribution amount in that number. But if you do a Roth 401k, you're going to be paying tax. That will show up in your W-2 and you will pay tax on it. But now all the growth, and when you do pull it out of the Roth 401k, you won't have to pay taxes on the way out. So it's just a huge benefit that I think young people should take advantage of, because if you can put it in a Roth and just not forget about it, I try to invest Roth accounts way more aggressively for that fact that you're not going to pay taxes on the back end. So I love getting the idea of stuff in a Roth account if available.
So the actual Roth account itself is kind of like a checking account, if you will?
It's
Or
a
is it,
brokerage account,
it's a
similar to like
brokerage?
if you had an individual brokerage account at Fidelity, Charles Schwab, any of those brokerage firms. But I will say, like, as you do make money and your tax rate climbs, it's kind of like a little bit of a game that you play. Is, does it make sense if I'm in a, like, you start making money in your 30s, like you were contributing to the Roth in your 20s, and now all of a sudden you're in your 30s and you're making really good money and your tax rate's very high. Does it make sense to contribute to a Roth and pay taxes now? Some people love the idea of not of it growing for a number of years and then not paying taxes on the way out. But let's say you're doing really, really well for yourself and you're in the highest tax bracket. Does it make sense to pay taxes now at the highest tax bracket? Or does it make sense to do a traditional IRA, have that deducted off your high income tax years and not pay tax on that? And then when you retire and hopefully, it's kind of a catch-22. Hopefully you are making money. Hopefully you aren't making money in retirement. And if you aren't making money in retirement and it's in a traditional IRA, your tax rate is going to be significantly lower than it would be in your highest income years. So it's kind of a game of playing, like, what's my time frame look like? What does my tax bracket look like? What's my tax bracket going to look like at 60 versus 40? And does it make sense to pay the taxes now and get the deferred growth, or take the deduction now and then pay taxes when I'm in a lower tax bracket? So that's kind of one of the things where, like, working with a tax accountant or a financial planner helps with, but that's down the line. I would say don't worry about that until you're making good money and you're at that point. But right now, I would say stuff Roth accounts as much as you can.
So if I'm a high school student, let's use high school example. I'm a senior in high school. I'm working at a restaurant on the weekends, and I'm working at Dairy Queen on the weeknights. I'm making maybe $200 on the books a week. Does it make sense for me to start a Roth IRA? Because I know I'm not getting a 401k from, let's say, Dairy Queen, right?
I think it makes sense to figure out, your income and expenses first, because you don't, like, it's still a savings account and you're not going to touch it. And if you'll be 10 times worse off if you overstuff for retirement and you don't have enough money to live on, and you pull it out of that account and get hit with the penalties. It's 1,000 times worse if you were to not contribute at all. So I would say figure out your expenses, figure out your income, and then once you have, like, you have the steady emergency fund, I would say when emergency fund would be probably like 3 to 6 months expenses. You have that cash cushion that you're not going to need to touch any kind of retirement savings. Then start stuffing Roths and start doing that. But it really is, I would say, build up, because you don't want to have your balance sheet. You don't want to look at your assets and, like, your brokerage accounts, your cash accounts, and any other things you own, or your credit cards, and look at it and be like, oh well, 80% is in a retirement account. You don't, like, that's not going to do you any good, because how you going to live? And if you end up pulling from that retirement account, that's the worst thing you could do. So I would start saving, looking at your expenses and looking at what you can actually invest, and then the second move would be to start saving for retirements.
Yeah, I also think on the subject of just seeing your financial picture, there's a lot of great apps out there too, that allows you, you sync up whatever your savings accounts, your credit cards, brokerage accounts, whatever the case is. And I think, at least for me, I think things are a little less overwhelming when you can kind of see the high level picture. and you kind of know, you can see, this is my debt, this is my, this is my, my assets, this is my income every month. So I would recommend, downloading any type of these apps. I know Mint is an app. There's Personal Capital. There's just really smart ways for you to just get a better idea of your own financial picture, because, a lot of people don't really have a great idea. Some people, you might say, how much you pay in bills every month. And I feel like a lot of times people can give you a kind of an estimate, but they don't really sometimes know exactly how much they're paying every month for things.
Yeah,
So
I would say no, like it's a question, and honestly, it's like, oh, how much you spending a month? And I mean, I do it myself. It's, you practice how you like do as I say, not as I do. I need to revisit how much my expenses are monthly. I do it for my business all the time, but for personal, like I would need to stay on top of it. And I think creating a budget, like Mike says, is probably one of the other first things that I would start looking at and doing. Because I was honestly thinking about, like, what I would tell somebody and how I kind of got started budgeting. I think it's the first time I really felt the financial, for the personal need for a budget, I bought a Hyundai Sonata in college, and I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods, and it was like, all right, this is a $230 a month payment. Honestly, looking back at it, not that bad, but in my head, making hourly at Dick's Sporting Goods was like, how the hell am I going to pay for this every month? And figuring out a budget of how much needs to come in, how much do I need to put aside every paycheck to make that work. And I would say create a budget now, because honestly, and get good at it, because it's only going to get harder with big ticket expenses. And as you make more income, you would think it gets easier, but it doesn't. Your expenses just get bigger and bigger. And, and it goes from buying a car to renting to buying a home to, and then eventually trying to save for retirement and looking at, how much it all really costs. And as your income grows, so does your expenses. It's human nature. We all want to, I don't know, we all want to have nice things and live. I mean, unfortunately, I think most everybody lives at their means. If not, hopefully they try to save more. But unfortunately, the grand scheme of things is most people spend what they make, and it's not the best thing. You should be looking and saving as much as you possibly can. But I would say start a budget now, because it's going to help you out the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had a similar situation, a little more extreme, but before I moved out of my parents' house when I was 23, I was saving a ton of money. Obviously, I was making decent salary out of college, my first real salary job, and I'm saving a ton of money, and I'm able to go out and do all these things. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I want to move out to Brooklyn and get my own place. And I didn't make a budget plan or anything. I just knew in the moment I was socking away money and putting money in my 401k. And then I get my apartment and I saved X amount of money, and you don't realize all the things that cost. You have to buy furniture. It's usually first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit, all these things. And then, things got better after a little bit, but my first year or two living on my own, it was kind of paycheck to paycheck, because I didn't plan the way I should have, and like Will alluded to earlier, we're hoping that you learn from our mistakes.
Yes, definitely. And you're going to have your own mistakes along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And you'll get burned, and then you'll learn from it. And that's, that's life. But try to minimize the burns, I guess. That'd be
you also don't know what you don't know. And so if I had known, I never heard of a Roth IRA, I up until a couple years ago, I had no idea. And so if instead of me putting away money in my sock drawer, I was making cash, or I was, cashing checks and saving my money
under the mattress,
sock drawer, all types of places. But, having cash on hand probably wasn't the best move, in terms of what I could have been doing for the future. Right. like, but I had no idea. So I feel like too, the more you learn about the even terminology and just like are exposed to this world of finance, the more you become curious, like you said about taxes. It's like once you get hit with your first paycheck and you look at like how much state taxes and federal taxes and
You
you
learn real
know
quick.
you're like, what? Social Security? Like you have, like you, your first paycheck is
Like,
like,
where'd all my money go?
yeah,
I I think it's funny. It's the common thing. It's like people get their first bonus, and bonuses get hit super hard. It's like treated as supplemental income. It gets hit at like 25% federal rate, and if it's, I mean, and then honestly, if the more money, if it's over a threshold, it gets hit at like the max rate. But 25% federal, the max rate for your state, and then you're also probably going to put a little bit in your 401k. It's like after hacking it up, like, oh, I'm getting this. And then it's going to be like, no, you're getting about 55% of that. And it's just funny, like, and then people realize real quick, it's like, all right, I got to get my handle on this because like it stinks. Like, you think you're making one, you think you're going to get this amount of money in your bank account, and it turns out to be about half of that. So I think the more you do it, and the more money and the more you get burned by it, and you force yourself to learn. And but I would encourage you to kind of look into it now, do as much reading as you can, and then this I'd say 2022. Look at your 2020. I would say start looking at your tax situation now. Look at your pay stub and the withholding, and kind of figure out what the withholding rate is, and what your rough tax bracket's going to look like. And then maybe, are you over withheld? Are you under withheld? And kind of figure out like what's going on in my pay stub that would give me a bigger return. That's going to give me, am I going to owe money? And just get your hands dirty with it. And the more you do that, the more you learn. It's inevitable.
awesome. So we've covered taxes, we've covered in retirement accounts, and we've covered budgeting. What else are some other key things you think that young people, young adults, even people our age should be looking at or getting into?
I'm very, very, very big on automating things in general. So like I'm a big fan of
I totally agree.
automating your bills and automating your savings if you can. That's been one of the biggest things for me. I kind of look at automating your savings as like paying myself. It sounds silly, but like because everyone's paying themselves when they go to work, right? And they work and make a wage. But I like to pay myself first, automatically saving money, and then whatever's left over is really should be going to all my bills, which again I automate. And then if you have a little bit extra money left over, I don't know, enjoy it. I think people will have a much healthier relationship with money if they don't kind of restrict themselves from enjoying life as well. Like obviously, first and foremost, we're supposed to be teaching like how to save, how to invest, how to understand all these terms. But also I think it's important to kind of enjoy life. And if you have a little extra money left over after you've done everything you could, after you've 401k, IRA, savings, paying all your bills, after that, I think, whatever's left over, do things that, make you happy.
I agree. And the one part I would touch on with the automated that I did, and I think it was like me and my wife did it when we were saving for a wedding. It was like, all right, well, we're going to start direct depositing into this joint account, and we're not going to touch it. And that's going to be the wedding fund. And we did it for we got engaged, and that was one of the first things we set up, direct deposit. However, and it grows because you forget about it. You literally, it doesn't come into your psyche that is available to you, because you kind of just, that's for this, and it's just direct deposit into it. And I would encourage younger people to do as little as as much as you can feel comfortable with, but honestly, it doesn't have to be a crazy number. If you did $25 a paycheck, after a year, it's going to be a pretty sizable amount. And I think, I would encourage people to do that. I would say maybe direct deposit to like a high yield checking account, but I don't really think those exist right now. So just do it in an account that that either maybe it's at a different bank and you don't even have the app to look at it. Just put it in there and just don't even worry about that. That is for rainy days fund. And once it gets to that rainy day fund, now you have this emergency amount that grew to a certain number that you feel comfortable having in case, you got to buy a car one day, or, something happens and you need to pull from it. It's there for emergencies. And I like having that cash cushion just because before you kind of start investing, I think it's 100% important to build that cash cushion so that when, you are investing and you're investing long term, like we said with the retirement accounts, you're less likely to pull from it. You're less likely to pull from it, you get penalized, but you'll be less likely to pull from it if you forget about it, and you also have cash in a checking account that you can access first rather than selling these positions and either realizing a taxable event, whether it grew a lot, or selling at a down market. And I think keeping that nest of cash savings on the side just by direct depositing and forgetting about it is what I would focus on doing first. And then once that grows to a healthy amount that you're comfortable with keeping in cash, then looking to start investing and to grow your account that way.
Love it. Love it. So that was one of the big things that I learned in college when I worked at a credit union.
I remember credit cards, slinging credit cards,
slinging checking accounts, and signing people up for credit.
Hey, you need a PN. What was it? PSENG account.
Yes.
I don't know.
Pennsylvania
PSENG.
State.
What was it called?
Pennsylvania State Employees Credit Union. Big fan of credit unions.
PSEC.
Yep. All part of that network. But that was one of the things that my manager told me to this day. Shout out to Karen. Karen was like one of the best managers I ever had. And she told me, she showed us within the checking account, like you log on to the interface online and you can set up these little account. You can set up your own different individual accounts within the account, and you can send portions of your paycheck to any one of those accounts. So I had like an emergency fund, I had a savings fund, and I had like a vacation fund. So then I just had, I was making like $9 an hour, but whatever. So I was like, you didn't need a lot in college. I had my meal plan was already paid for, just needed $20 for the weekend because 50-cent beers and, $6 cheesesteaks, you're good. You don't need much. And so that was my first taste of really saving money like that and automating it. And I was able to buy my first car partially because of that, because the money just started to accumulate. And so I'm definitely a big fan of that as well.
Nice.
So what else? So we have taxes, we have automation, we have budgets, and we also have the saving for the retirement. Is there any other things that you guys think are vital for our younger audience, our young adults?
I mean, I think if they kind of go off those core principles, I think they will definitely be ahead of the game. Because I don't think, I would argue that a large majority of people do not think of all those things. They might have a budget, but not have a 401k or an IRA. They might, putting them all together is really, how you can succeed. And I think if they just kind of, really get a good handle on all those principles, I think they'll be really, really set up well.
Agreed. I think the only other thing I would probably say would be, I do think this is kind of touched upon in school, but I don't think maybe it's as important, because I think I couldn't wrap my head around it when I was 19, 20 years old, and even learning about it in college, like the actual power of compound interest, and you actually feeling how constantly saving and getting growth on your money is, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it unless you had that savings account like we talked about. And it doesn't need to be a substantial amount. If you have a meal plan at school and, most of your expenses are going to be food and, dollar beers and dollar slices of pizza and cab rides, then I would say figure out how much you're going to need for that semester, maybe 2 semesters, and then and look to invest. Because I mean, realistically, like if you took $10,000, invested it now, and over like at 4% interest rate, that $10,000 is going to grow to $33,000 in 30 years. And I think I had a hard time fathoming the fact that, like, oh yeah, in 30 years, I'm really going to care about this $10,000 and growing it to that point. But yes, if you're adding to it, if you're adding $25 to that $10,000 every paycheck for the next 30 years, it's going to look a lot better than $34,000 in 30 years. So I think kind of dollar cost averaging into a brokerage account when you have enough to save or you're not touching it, for the long term. I would recommend doing that to anybody kind of starting out investing and investing for the long term. I wouldn't open a brokerage account if you know that you're going to need this money in 3 months, in 6 months, and maybe even if you have it pegged for a year. I don't really necessarily say I would invest. But if you have enough emergency cash on the side that you don't need to pull out in down markets, or you're not gonna be touching this, but like saving enough and constantly adding to it and getting an average growth rate of 4% is, if you've looked over the last 10 years, is easily doable, especially for younger people who can afford a high risk tolerance. I mean, I don't know. That's the other thing that's kind of important to figure out is how comfortable are you seeing yes, people are more comfortable with seeing their 401k fluctuate because they know they're not going to touch it. But are you comfortable seeing, money that you can touch and knowing that you have it pegged? But if you don't have it pegged for anything in the next year, in the next 2 years, I would say, invest it rather, as aggressive as you're comfortable with, and hope and keep stuffing it and keep adding to it. And then over time, you're gonna be shocked at how fast that's gonna grow over like what that number would look like in 10 years.
100% agreed.
So dollar cost averaging into a brokerage account as a part of your investment plan, that's more so with money that you can afford to lose, more or less.
Just money.
Yes.
You don't really, I like to look at it as money you don't need right now.
Yes.
So it's because if you don't need it right now, over the long term, you're not going to lose it if you're investing it in, smart investments and not, going above your risk tolerance.
Right.
So if you just, and dollar cost averaging, for people who do not really know what that term means, it's just, you don't really like try to, and I don't believe in timing the market. I think it's silly. But you're just, let's say you want to buy shares of a company, you're adding to that investment, or a mutual fund or ETF, whatever the investment is, you're adding to it, whether it's up 5%, down 5%, up 10, and over time, your cost of the investment will average out. So, you're not trying to get in when it's low or sell when it's high or buy when it's low. You're just investing as you contribute.
Agreed.
Just consistent, whatever it is amount per month or per week. You guys recommend a weekly contribution to investment brokerage account or something monthly?
No, I don't think it needs. I think I honestly would let the cash. I mean, it's totally fine, like to let the cash build up into your account until you have enough to really go in there and and buy either mutual funds, ETFs, or stocks that you like, and build it up to the point where I would say probably do it every 2-3 months. I think that's totally fine. But if you want and you're getting and for whatever reason, you're making a good amount of money, getting, every week, 2 weeks. I don't see a problem with doing it that way either. I just picture myself though as a high school or college student, saving money. I probably would wait till it got up to like, $250, $500, and then slowly kind of either buy ETFs, or tend to be lower cost. There's lower cost mutual funds, and look at that way, and kind of and invest out your money. Typically, I would probably recommend some kind of like a broad stock market ETF, but that's just me. I like low cost funds. I feel like they just track, easy for young people to understand that you're getting a basket of securities, and it's a lot less volatile than just owning, Tesla.
Yeah, and you feel good owning a little piece of everything,
Yeah.
and like we said before, if you really like this stuff and you really like to really get nitty gritty and research, but that honestly is probably not for most people. So, just getting the exposure to the market, and, when Amazon's in the news and it's up, you're not saying, oh, I wish I bought Amazon. You have a piece of Amazon in your mutual fund or your ETF. So it's just a good way to kind of just get exposure to the best companies in the world.
Yeah. And I would even do your research even when you're looking at ETFs and mutual funds, because if you do have a certain company that you really, really like, and you feel good about it, but you don't want to just hold that one concentrated position, there's ETFs and mutual funds that hold like up to 15-20% in Apple. So it's like, if like QQQ is pretty much tracks the NASDAQ, and I'm pretty sure like 11% of that fund is invested in Apple. So it's like you can have a pretty decent exposure to that company, but you don't have to necessarily be all in on that company. If something happens and they end up, there it comes out that they've been tracking everything that we do, and your iPhone is, and Apple gets sued for billions of dollars, that's not going to hurt your whole portfolio, because you still have probably, I'm not actually sure how many funds are in QQQ, but I imagine it's way over, like, I don't know if it's as big as some of the other broad. I think it's probably closer to 100.
I think QQQ is all high market cap, like high cap, right?
Yeah, it's like I think it tracks the NASDAQ 100. So it's gonna be like, it'll be that based on,
You want to know how many holdings are in there?
yeah,
102.
102. So yeah, that'll track the NASDAQ 100. So if you wanted to look at the NASDAQ every day and see how your position's doing, you'd probably follow that. There's also ETFs that track the S&P 500, and there's also technology ETFs if you want to get if you feel good about technology over the next 10 years, and looking to invest in that, and you can do your research, and it ends up being a lot of fun, because it's your money, and the more you're into it and the more you're excited about it, the more you're going to learn. So I think as someone, being young, getting into it for the first time, that would be something I would do, is pretty much, Google ETFs and mutual funds, look at they show you the underlying holdings, and see, how they're doing, how they're performing, and look at like what sectors they're going to be invested in. Are they heavily tech? Are they heavily healthcare? And see, and you have obviously everybody has their own opinions on what's going on in the economy, if you're following anything, and make your investment in that regard. But I also wouldn't necessarily make an investment based on like a 3-month outcome. Probably look a little bit long term before that.
Awesome. So I just want to, as we wrap up here, because we're at our time mark, is there any, I want to give our audience something tangible to take away, obviously on top of the information they already got from you guys, but as far as brokerage accounts, maybe you already mentioned QQQ as ETFs. What are some good, after they've done their research, what are some of those good brokerage accounts that you might recommend? Mike, you mentioned some apps like Mint and Personal Capital for budgeting. So what are some, I guess, like you said, tools or just things to have in their back pocket that they can use to help them
Yes. So I think, I mean, you can open up a Fidelity account, and the trades are free on stocks and ETFs. It's $25 charge if you were to buy a mutual fund. But at the same time, you know, I like a nice diversification of ETFs and mutual funds because you have an active manager like who's with 30 plus years experience trying to actively beat the benchmark. So what that means is, let's say you own a mutual fund in large cap growth, which is going to be a lot of technology companies versus an iShares ETF S&P growth ETF. It's going to be less expensive, but what it's going to do is pretty much hold the largest market cap tech companies and pretty much track what the index is doing. Whereas if you buy a mutual fund, you're going to have somebody actively in there making changes where they charge a little bit more of a fee. It's usually around 1%, but they're literally trying to actively beat the benchmark. And I would, look around, look and see, how many underlying holdings they have. Obviously, the less holdings they hold in the mutual fund, the more aggressive it's going to be. The more, the more positions the ETF has, it's going to be way closer to the benchmark. So, I mean, there's ETFs out there that the S&P 500 is 500 securities. They have 500 securities in this ETF that is literally going to move in tandem, give or take a couple percentages. But honestly, I would do your research and kind of look at it that way.
I agree.
All right, so there you have it. Ton of amazing financial advice from our two financial experts, Michael Petrillo and Christopher Badaracco. Thank you, guys. This has been another episode of Money Talks, where we talk about everything and all things money and finance on a weekly basis. You can find us out here. We are live on YouTube. This is episode 2. And yeah, have a good night.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Will.
All right.
Well.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys. Peace.
Later, dude.